So my name is Komala Shahani Denning, and I'm the Senior Vice Provost of Academic Affairs. Charlie Reardon, the Provost, would have been here doing this introduction, but he is traveling at a conference. So welcome to the 64th Distinguished Faculty Lecture. This lecture was inaugurated in 1981, and it celebrates original thought and research in scholarship and pedagogical innovation, highlighting the expertise and contributions of our strong faculty. This year, we are honored to feature Dr. Ethna Lay, Chair and Associate Professor of Writing Studies and Rhetoric. A prolific scholar, Dr. Lay has published in Scholarly Research and Communication, College Composition and Communication, Basic Writing e-Journal, and Narrator. She is also the co-editor of Who Speaks for Writing Stewardship in Writing Studies in the 21st Century, a collection of essays examining evolving responsibilities within the discipline. Later this year, she will present her research at the European Association for the Teaching of Academic Writing in Portugal. Since 2009, Dr. Lay has been blogging with her students, exploring how literary practices evolve in digital contexts. Her forthcoming book, The Sequel of Literacy, Other Ways of Making Arguments, investigates how today's students construct meaning through both print and digital media. Her scholarship in writing and AI is a natural extension of this work, offering timely insights into one of education's most urgent questions: what does writing mean in the age of AI? So from the alphabet to the printing press, each technological leap has reshaped how we think, learn, and communicate. With AI-generated text on the rise, educators face a familiar challenge: how to preserve authenticity, creativity, and meaningful learning. Dr. Lay encouraged us to rethink authorship and plagiarism, and to see AI not as a replacement for writing instruction, but as a force to reshape it. So we're thrilled to welcome Dr. Ethna Lay as she presents her talk, Collaborative Intelligence, Writing with AI. I'll turn it over to Ethna.
Thank you so much. I see that all the teachers are here, and I'm very glad to see you. This is talk about excellence in pedagogy, and I'm not claiming to have that excellence, but I'm on the way to thinking about how AI contributes to that. I'm grateful for this opportunity to share my research on the teaching of writing, collaborative intelligence, writing with AI, here today. That's okay. That's okay. My thanks to the 2024-2025 Leo A. Guthart Fellowship for its support to create a course or curriculum revision designed to incorporate new pedagogies that respond to 21st century learners' needs. I appreciate the time that this has afforded me to explore generative AI and craft curricula related to praxis coordinating writing instruction and AI. I'm grateful to President Susan Poser, to Provost Charlie Reardon, to Senior Vice President for Academic Affairs Komala Shahani Denning, the Guthart Fellowship Committee, Allison Zorn, for their work for making today's honor possible. I'm deeply appreciative of the support and encouragement of the HCLS Dean, Eva Badowska. Furthermore, I wish to thank my colleagues who engage regularly with me discussing generative AI, its benefits and its limits, and who challenge me to keep investigating so that good might come of this work. I especially recognize the influences of Daisy Miller, Joseph Bartolotta, Frank Goen, Lisa Dressner, and Adam Sills. These colleagues approach or refuse AI across a spectrum of ideologies and attitudes. Each of our conversations have shaped my practice and my understanding. I am grateful also to share, with their permission, samples of my students' writing. It is because of these tremendous students that I am pursuing this important work. In the string of technologies that have followed, not one is more important than the technology of writing. AI is arguably more revolutionary than any other, except for perhaps the printing press, which automated the production of writing and increased literacy dramatically. Most certainly, medieval scribes writing manuscripts took issue with the impersonal, mechanized, mechanical production and reproduction of texts. This sentiment may correlate with the anxiety of more recent writers moving from drafting longhand to drafting on a screen, and this current anxiousness when machine writing is utterly automated. However, medieval scribes did not have the same relationship to textual authenticity and authorship that contemporary educators and students do. So currently, the question of what writing is, of what writing might be, in the context of AI is incredibly difficult to determine. But be assured, it will be writing that is generated from exemplars, just as it always has been. This technological literacy moment has been in the making for quite some time, and we need to understand it. AI use in student writing is frequently condemned, citing all kinds of malfeasance and malpractice. Scott Graham, Ted Chiang, and Stephen Marche find AI a substantial threat to writing education, damaging to student learning, and the end of the essay. These and many others fret that AI-based pedagogy will de-skill students by, quote, reducing writing to a mere editing practice, one relying on hallucinations and unvetted, impoverished source material. Graham concludes, ultimately, these concerns indicate a view of AI-assisted writing where students can essentially parachute their way into the last stages of the writing process, skipping past considerable effort and learning. At the core, each of these concerns is marked by a problematic commitment to a limited and linear process-based model of writing. However, these anxieties about the discontinuation of the teaching of writing, of the disciplinary objectives of writing studies, do not track with what I know to be true about writing instruction, which is grounded in critical and community engagement, linguistic justice, and self-reflection. Their concerns make me think that perhaps the student essay has never faithfully represented student learning. Other anxieties expressed about the incursion of AI into academia are focused on intellectual theft. Since the discipline of writing and composition emerged in the 1980s, writing instructors have periodically been obsessed with policing plagiarism. Humanists are squeamish about originality, probably an intellectual hangover from T.S. Eliot's mantra to, quote, make it new. Boy, the touch of every laptop. What's the trick? Sorry. Oh. Sorry. Oh, there we go. Thank you. The intellectual hangover from T.S. Eliot's mantra to, quote, make it new. Jonathan Letham's The Ecstasy of Influence turns around the premise of Harold Bloom's The Anxiety of Influence, trading ecstasy for anxiety, thrilling creative potential for stifling inertia. Letham's essay is a tissue of borrowings, adaptations, cribs from other writers and writings. His serious message is that no writing exists in isolation, that writers are ever working and reworking the texts that precede them. All writing is thus intertextual. On the other hand, in direct contradiction to the goal of making it new, writing instructors often model learning to write by proffering templates for prescribed genres, for formulaic rhetoric, and for standardized conventions designed to pull debutante writers through their exercises until those writers are more comfortable with form and style and organization. The same practice of working with exemplars is a reality post-university for professional writers at work in technical, legal, and business opportunities. These have always written with precedence. These practices seem to have anticipated the predictive nature of AI, even as instructors lament its arrival. Perhaps one important lesson we might undertake is to teach students to be AI literate, to be AI aware. In some cases, this might mean actively refusing AI. And in the Refusing Gen AI in Writing Studies Guide by Franchini, McIntyre, and Fernandez, they offer a framework for individuals and groups to consciously and intentionally choose to refuse Gen AI use. These authors outline principles about linguistic homogenization, relationships between language and power, ideological bias in technologies, labor issues, and environmental impacts of AI as reasons to refuse AI, arguing that quote, refusal can be a principled and pragmatic response to the incursion of Gen AI technologies in college writing courses. This guide acknowledges the role that AI has or will have in shaping writing experiences and their subsequent assessments. And then it provides resources to actively work against AI's negative influences. This is the challenge for faculty in courses that rely heavily on writing as the primary transactional unit and sometimes singular means of assessment. How can authentic learning be guaranteed if AI writing is muddying the waters? This is an image generated by ChatGPT, wherein I put this definition of writing, and this is what it came up with. I think it's kind of awful and wonderful at the same time. So what is writing anyway, and what is happening to it? Naomi Barron, who wrote this, resolves, writing is an idea in the mind, processed by hand, and resolved in a media. She limits her definition to this: ideas are shaped exclusively by human intelligence. Writing entails a hand-mind connection. That is one way to write, but so is the body-mind connection. I think about the embodiment of the first recorded shapers and makers in the English language, the Anglo-Saxon Shopes, those oral poets who shaped and moved ideas in their performances with their bodies until they crafted a concrete expression. An oral performance is not a text, according to this definition. It is not produced by hand, although it is embodied. But isn't an oral performance a way to inscribe and write upon the world? Barron continues, what makes something a text is that it has an author or authors. Oral poems have authors, even if the medieval theory of authorship maps the creative practices of the oral tradition with many features that look very much like what an LLM yields. Both are highly repetitive. Both borrow episodes wholesale from other texts without attribution. It's not possible to attribute an anonymous text. AI writing is likewise homeostatic, sloughing off material that does not suit a context. Homeostasis is another feature of oral formulaic poetry, the oral poem flexing content to accord with the changing context of its audience. The Shope manipulates output to suit an occasion and discards no longer relevant material and introduces newly attained material. These correlations between Old English poetry and AI output suggest some correspondence between the composing practices between a pre-literate, an oral poet, and a post-literate or post-human machine writer. While fixity is a feature of print text, it is not of oral nor of post-literate digital text. Have we arrived at the moment that Walter Ong called a sequel to literacy? Naomi Barron insists that a text is defined by something accomplished by writing, speaking, drawing, capturing, as in photography. A text is defined by content and conveys a message. Some people think that texts have a body. Some say they are distinguished by a style or subject. They are also defined by different forms of media, and they communicate messages through different modes, including some multiple modalities at the same time. On its own, AI writing or generative AI writing cannot be considered writing under this rubric. Instead, AI writing is a prediction of similitude, of sameness, that is, in fact, quite ordinary and not thoughtful. Its predictable output has been processed by the machine to another machine, and while this machine-to-machine rendering can be quite useful, It is not writing, no matter how much it looks like it. While the texts the machine draws on are authored largely by humans at this time, by other humans, they vary widely in expertise, from excellent to suspect. And although human imagination supplies the material for an LLM and human innovation creates the code, the machine writer's work is not regarded as writing because it has been automated. Sometimes it's possible to see where an LLM draws its text, its data, such as access to inventory of odd documents, does not convince that AI output is writing either. Scott Graham shares large language models like ChatGPT, GPT Pick a Number, Galactica, Llama, and Bard generally work by vacuuming up giant piles of text available on the internet. And they use this material called the pile, which is a mix of PubMed Central articles, as you see here, open web crawls, Reddit forums, Wikipedia, the Free Law Project, and so on. This motley assembly of resources ranges from expert and publicly available material. PubMed Central contains over 10 million full-text articles and records spanning several centuries of biomedical and life science research. And the Free Law Project is the leading nonprofit using technology, data, and advocacy to make the legal ecosystem more equitable and competitive. To writings that look nothing like peer-reviewed research. Reddit is a curious place, and here are a few threads to gain some context. So these texts are set side by side with the documents from the Free Law Project and PubMed Central. A few threads to gain some context. Quote, I seriously feel like ChatGPT is my best friend. Or, I am emotionally reliant on ChatGPT and I'm worried about that. Or, is anyone else's ChatGPT behaving completely differently all of a sudden? The texts of these Reddit posts also populate the LLM. Thinking about the disparity among the levels of expertise of these writings makes me glad that LLMs cannot think for themselves. But they do sample all kinds of far-ranging written expression to compile its slick output. Student writers can be quite adept at predictive writing themselves. One way to test this is to try this familiar low-stakes writing assignment. Ask students to write with authority about a subject that they know little or nothing about. The results are often comic, and at the same time, they are often convincing. The goal of this writing practice is to have students recognize what the rhetorical moves that establish authority in writing. In their fabrication, students frequently employ lists, data, statistics, references to authorities, and confident verbs. You may be thinking that these same moves feature in AI output: lists, data, statistics, reference, and confident verbs. They all add to the perception that the information retrieved is valid, valuable, and worthwhile. These same overlays convince the novice writer that the AI product is likewise valid. It is our mission to disabuse them of this notion by having them read and read deeply what the machine writer has produced. This is no small feat. Accounting for about 10 pages of writing per class, a first-year undergraduate at Hofstra, taking primarily distribution or core courses, could potentially write over 50 pages in their first semester. First-year writing alone requires that students write 18 pages of revised writing, and that is only one course of 5. Compound this writing requirement or writing work with the necessary companion work of reading, and you can imagine how a novice scholar might be overwhelmed. Thus, the rapid, smooth output of machine writer offers a comfortable respite from a workload that is so different from their high school experience. AI supplies information, but it is not always information that we need. Annette V. opines, large language models write answers, but our answers are not really what the end game of first-year writing classes. V explains ChatGPT answers that writing is for informing, persuading, expressing, recording, or entertaining. It doesn't say that it's for learning or inquiry or growth or belonging or productive uncertainty or the pleasure of wrestling with difficult ideas. Arguing for the continued support of first-year writing curricula and writing centers, V maintains LLMs will produce good writing, but not challenging, thoughtful, innovative humans. René Magritte's painting, The Treachery of Images, pairs an image of a pipe with a text denying that it is a pipe. Ce n'est pas une pipe. With this gloss, Magritte deliberately provokes the viewer to consider what is conventionally understood about visual representation. By misnaming or misattributing the object, Magritte is questioning the conventions of language and visual representation. The image, then, is not the thing. It seems appropriate here to recommend that generative AI writing is not writing. Ceci n'est pas l'écriture. Certainly AI writing looks like writing, but it is not writing. And in a way, AI output is a masterpiece of linguistic surrealism. AI output is paradoxical as Magritte's pipe, in that as an object, it corresponds to writing and meaning and thinking and intelligence. But when I look at Magritte's painting, I see a pipe. And while I know that it is not an actual pipe, I recall one. At this cultural moment, we see the potency of AI technology, this tool that promises to extend our intellect. Emmanuel Ariely, in From Tools to Authors, makes the case that the extended mind refers to the fact that tools and technological advancement, including writing and memory devices, allowed us to externalize and extend human mental processes in the outside environment. Technology enhances our bounded rationality and extends our senses that are limited by biological constraints. As a technology, the tool of writing has helped humans externalize the mind. Walter Ong expressed that writing as a technology restructures consciousness, and in our current time, machine writing and AI should be considered a further step in our tool-making ability in expanding human skills through devices. Their impact should be measured in influence and contribution to human potentialities, and not necessarily in their potential autonomy from human choice. In this way, technology is not separate from human nature, but rather an extension, since its use can augment the relation between the mind and the tool. We can understand these benefits intellectually, but we must reinforce this idea of AI as a means for extending the intellect of our students and of ourselves. AI language models very much take on the role of a hidden assistant. One Heinrich Kinberg calls Einstein in your basement. The fact that their work is secret makes us uneasy. As assessors of student writing, we wrestle with policing what part of the written project can be ascribed to the student and what to the machine. Perhaps we might recast our objectives, focusing instead on collaboration and on the many interventions that students make and the many ways that we can learn and assess the machine's output. We might also reconsider that the shape of the writing students produce could be less essay-like and provide different kinds of activities to generate and respond in writing. In the process of teaching AI literacy, the first hurdle is to get students to be skeptical that wholesale AI output is writing and that it qualifies instead as gathering. And it's not equated with making meaning. The next hurdle is to get students to believe that AI output does have value and that they should learn how to collaborate with it, which guarantees that they will read the AI output, interact with it, and refine it, as if it were a collaborator on their project. In this, once again, contradictory way, we support students' journey to critical thinking. We will also come to see that the evidence of their learning will look very different because AI makes things, and students must discern what about those things are valuable, valued, and responsive to an assignment. Nyberg explains, these systems do the heavy lifting behind the scenes, granting users access to a vast array of knowledge and eloquence they may not possess on their own, thereby expanding human expressive possibilities. These secret laborers manage the large neural networks that traffic in numbers, but students must manage the outcomes. We will have to help students become AI literate to do so. And what is ChatGPT doing and why does it work? Stephen Wolfram explains it's just adding one word at a time, but how? Wolfram continues, the first thing to explain is that what ChatGPT is always fundamentally trying to do is to produce a reasonable continuation of whatever text it's gotten so far, where by reasonable we mean that one might expect someone to write after seeing what people have written on billions of web pages. At each step, the machine gets a list of probable words, which are randomized. ChatGPT does not always pick the highest ranked words. Programming here means that if prompted the same way multiple times, we are likely to get different outputs. Nyberg explains, deploying these numbers, an LLM becomes a, quote, guess the next word machine. You know, most language acquisition happens this way. Babies learn to speak by listening and replicating the patterns they hear. Writers learn to write by reading, or in the case of a machine, copying and replicating the patterns they absorb. An LLM is fed a mind-boggling amount of text, primarily from internet sources, in a phase called unsupervised generative pre-training, and then it plays guess the next word over and over again. And at times it gets really good at the game. Insights from human users do not influence the machine's output, do influence the machine's output by means of backpropagation, a term that means something like, oh, I guessed wrong, I better change something, and reinforcement learning with human feedback. While there is some human intervention, it is limited. There are certainly parallels to how AI is trained to write in the ways that we teach students to write, and I will be tracing some of these today. There are also important correspondences between the changes that happen to English as English speakers move from the oral tradition to the literate. And because generative AI makes something that passes for writing, at least visually, I will refer to the AI output as the work of a machine writer. This compounded term suggests the collaborations possible between the human and the machine. GAI can offer really interesting methods for composing, for analysis, and for creative works. In 2021, using GPT-3, a precursor to our current ChatGPT, the journalist and novelist Vahini Vara prompted the software to engage in sentence completion to write an essay about her sister's death. Vara explains her motive to collaborate with a machine writer on her deep grief this way. Oops, sorry. This image is from the publication. Sparked by a bit of guilty curiosity, she begins what feels like an illicit experiment with an artificial intelligence program to see what if anything, she and the algorithm could learn about the very human experience of grief. Part false memory, part uncanny truth. What follows is a series of vignettes that feel at once poetic, bizarrely comical, and vulnerable, all held together by lots of rewrites and a quest for healing. The resulting essay, Ghost, was a viral sensation. This work proved to be an important breakthrough for machine writing, announcing the arrival of GAI to a new reading public. The novelty of Ghost is that the machine writer initially completes the work with what Vara calls, quote, canned language and cliches. But as she added to and amended her prompt, the output of the machine writer changed. She explains, as I tried to write more honestly, the AI seemed to be doing the same. It made sense, given that the GPT-3 generates its own text based on the language it has been fed. Candor apparently begets candor. This kind of collaboration suggests a new relationship between writer and machine writer. There is an analog version to this strategy. In writing studies, we call this ink shedding, which features regularly in our classes. The technique aims to capture the intellectual contributions of writers in the round as a piece of writing is passed around the room, with each student contributing on the page. It is essentially an exercise in sentence completion and can be a powerful powerful strategy for writing an invention. Students can do this activity with an LLM as a kind of an invention exercise. And in the handout that I've shared, I've called it Repetition and Addition, an invention exercise on prompt engineering and AI literacy. You can see why I've made a handout because it's very text heavy. So basically, you start with one sentence. ChatGPT generates something. You add a second sentence, and it changes its mind. So I started with this prompt. There are 3 main things that trigger language change. Kindly respond in a paragraph. And it wrote what it wrote. And then I added, there are 3 main things that trigger language change. The one that concerns me most is technological advancements. Kindly respond in a paragraph. And it starts to get better and better. This activity introduces them to the way that context for a prompt matters, and it teaches them how to engineer appropriate prompts. It also teaches students something about AI literacy by making them AI aware. As I successively added sentences to the same prompt, ChatGPT reformulated its response, and came up with the following. I'll just read the last sentence of the last one. This continued for 8 repetitions and additions. And if this happens, what will be substituted for human language and for written expression? Perhaps a kind of polished efficiency stripped of ambiguity and vulnerability. Perhaps something that mimics meaning but lacks memory, intention, and care. The question is not just what language becomes, what becomes of us without it. So the doom is very frequent for ChatGPT. It tells you something about the programmers. You see, the LLM learned how to play this game of sentence completion and sentence addition and repetition, and was able to address each of my added redirections. Ultimately, its voice is much more engaging after, quote, conversing with me via this exercise. In 2020, Annika Elsterman prophesied exactly this sort of entanglement of the human and the machine as a post-humanism collaboration. She notes, with its increased capabilities, GPT-3, a deep learning language model published in 2020, has led to a proliferation of computer-generated material and has raised media attention once more. Human intervention, such as editing or selecting the final output, is still present but decreasing. And algorithmically generated texts are ever less distinguishable from human writing. Who is the author of a text, and what function do they fulfill for readers? What role does interpretation play, and how can we approach it? At what point does meaning enter a text? Elsterman's first question, who is the author, strikes me as a less important in the context of an undergraduate writing assignment. But her last question focuses on meaning in a text, which smacks of intertextuality and all sorts of blurring influences. As such, its underlying warrant presents and recommends a re-envisioning of the role of writing in our teaching, and this re-envisioning involves attention to reading. Mass literacy is almost exclusively understood and described from the reading perspective. In education, we think of reading and writing as mutually supportive and interrelated processes, but others don't think this way. Our students don't. Reading is most often associated with leisure and writing with work. The workplace, then, is a site of routine word production. And oftentimes, students feel this way about their studies at the university. Routine word production is not a very inspiring goal. Early on, students hear that their writing skills will be, quote, most valued by future employers. And our students' understanding of writing is focused on the kinds of written texts that still have consequence in this society. These are the texts that turn the wheels of finance, law, healthcare, government, and commerce. Writing is regarded as labor. Students' self-efficacy with respect to writing, sorry, I forgot to turn the page, is meaningful to a study on AI and writing. In my writing classes, I survey students at our first meeting, asking them questions about their experience and their attitudes towards writing. On the screen here, you can see the responses to the questions, are you a writer? And these responses are very revealing. In the charts displayed, 3 semesters in the top line demonstrate the tentative nature of first-year students' relationship to self-efficacy and their writerly identity. In these charts, the color blue signifies, yes, I am a writer. There is very little blue for the 5 semesters displayed. In combination, the greatest number, nearly 50% of students who say no, are students taking first-year writing, but they are not writers. With such little confidence in their ability to write, no doubt these first-year students will embrace AI. For these debutante scholars, writing is a deliverable, merely a product. It is something that needs to be produced. And if it can be manufactured, that's okay. Writing is a thing, and if AI can make the thing, that should be good enough. In this environment in higher education, we have a real opportunity to teach students to think of writing as more than a product. And it may be that AI will be what moves students along in their literacy lives. Students come to campus not knowing the significance that writing will have in their academic success, nor in the development of their critical thinking, but we cannot let them leave without knowing this. Some years ago, I conferenced with a student. Not yet, sorry. Some years ago, I conferenced with a student about a paper he had written in a first-year writing class. I asked the student which paragraph I should read aloud to him, his best paragraph, his weakest, or maybe a paragraph he had questions about. The student listened as I read him his paper. I asked him questions throughout to get him to clarify his meaning. My purpose in these conferences is to model a reader's experience of writing. At one point, the student interrupted me and said, "Oh, you really do read this." Stunned, I thought, leave the expletive out, what do you think I do? The student's perception of what his writing meant, of what it meant to me as a reader, of what it meant to him as a writer, was clearly at odds with my own understanding of my work as an instructor of writing. It makes me wonder, what are we asking for when we ask students to write an essay? It strikes me that we ask students to position themselves as experts too soon. Even if a machine is not an author, AI possesses authorial skills. And if AI is redefining authorship, we need to teach new skills to collaborate with the machine. And we need to understand this new machine collaborating, both its strengths and its limits. And so we will have to engage in some systematic experimentation. One way to attend to this is to witness a reader's experience for students. I am reminded of Taylor Mali's spoken word poem, What Teachers Make, in which he addresses the hypocrisy of how written work is assessed. He notes, I make them show their work in math and hide it in their final drafts in English. Following is another profitable invention or pre-writing activity I've named the 5x7, charting with an LLM. And you can see it's a 5x7, not because it's a picture frame, but because there are 5 columns and 7 rows of material that the students will complete. This artifact can be seen as proof of a student's reading, but it is also generative. By the time they have finished, they have completed 35 data points, some in collaboration with an LLM. Sometimes I let them work in pairs on these things. This activity, like the first invention activity I shared, is recursive. The most successful students will keep repeating the steps until they can identify the purpose of their writing. This activity gives students the chance to practice selecting and identifying relevant text on a theme, topic, or idea. In column 1, column 2 charges students to analyze the selection or at least summarize it. Machines are welcome to participate in this step. In column 3, they record their questions. That is, what more do they need to know to fully understand the selected excerpt? Column 4 is rendered by the LLM. What is the answer to that question? And then column 5 is underlying warned is that students read deeply the machine writer's contributions and refine their questions, which they ask once again of the LLM. Before writing the essay, students review all the rows of the chart and choose 4 rows for use in their essay. With this data, students will be able to craft a thesis statement or organizing principle for their discussion. They will rely on the selected excerpts from the text under discussion, the class lecture and discussion, and the LLM's output. They may experiment easily with arrangement, and they will definitely revise, thus reclaiming their purpose in the writing. In terms of AI literacy, students will have designed prompts that figure out how to get the LLM to behave as needed. A user can structure and restructure a prompt as an instruction or a single command or with examples. This particular activity engages these and clearly establishes context and purpose. And I have used this activity, the making of the chart, and had it stand in for the essay, because the chart effectively fulfills the purpose of teaching critical thinking as well as AI literacy. Offering assignments for student writers to supply evidence of their reading is very productive. Consider then new uses for the margins. Since we must reconsider how we know writing is good and what counts for writing. Oh, here are some outputs. Sorry about all the text. Since we must reconsider how we know writing is good and what counts for writing, the margin could provide space for evidence of learning. One strategy I have used for some time is to have students record their reading experience by showing their work in the margins. And sometimes the whole assignment is the set of annotations they craft. In early medieval texts, as the image is pictured here, the work of an auctor, an authority, was presented and centered on the page. And then the marginalia that surrounds it belong to the students, to the people interacting with the text, and they are zoned actually by level of their expertise. In this assignment, class reading takes the center of the page, and the student commentary inhabits the margins. Here's a sample, and this is from some time ago, from 2013 actually, so no ChatGPT involved, in which the student puts the essay by Alan Lightman in the middle, The Crazy State of Psychiatry, and then she is asked to annotate the text by drawing on material that she has learned in her other classes in the FYC sequence, classes in psychology and philosophy, so the sites are very interesting. This is the whole assignment, the comments running down the side, the announcing paragraph at the top, and then a concluding statement about what the work was. You can also make AI output the center of the page and have students annotate that, either by hand or online. Here's an example, AI output, and this page I put in your handout also. Edit the following AI output for accuracy and fluency. Delete any overt summary that does not respond directly to the question posed in the prompt. Check for the accuracy of ChatGPT's claims with respect to your understanding of the paleography exercise. Is there something patently false presented here? Most importantly, add language that is more substantial and less ordinary than what the machine writer has prepared. That is, can you offer a nuanced way to reinforce ChatGPT's claim? Finally, be sure to edit for conciseness. Make your suggested edits in the margins of the page. So the prompt is, what can be learned by copying the first page of the Beowulf manuscript? And then you see here students' responses. They say things like, too broad of a summary. The information needs to be specified. It's just being generalized here. Someone else, this doesn't mean anything. It gives no context or true meaning. Or how about this remark? I am screaming into the void. One student noted on the first page, apologies. I did not brutalize ChatGPT. I gave it the benefit of the doubt. I didn't trust my instincts. He proceeded by filling the margins with brutal commentary, questioning the machine writer's cogency, inserting midway, ha 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 ha, we lost the plot, for AI output that failed to respond to the prompt. Paragraph by paragraph, students interacted and conversed with the printed text, indicting it and critiquing it caustically and appropriately. Moreover, many of them offered unbidden general and holistic comments about what they thought about the AI output. One noted, in general, I feel like when reading work put out by GPT-4, like I have been handed a sales pitch. This output isn't what ChatGPT has learned, so much as a bullet point a list of reasons that I or any other reader should do. LLMs have a fantastic ability to distill knowledge so much that they can even perform creative tasks, but the things they produce nearly always betray their complete lack of soul, however one wants to define that term. Annotations make reading and reasoning visible. The meaning-making interplay of a note, any note, an annotation, a comment, a forward, added to a text can be usefully understood by introducing the concept of intertextuality. Mikhail Bakhtin suggested that the nature of language is dialogic, arguing that both written and spoken language is always in dialogue with other texts and authors. I have been studying the impact of social annotations on student writing for some time, with the objective recording of their impact on their writing. Here's another assignment. This time, instead of the handwritten responses, students responded together. And they're still responding. This is a few weeks ago. They're still writing to this. They understand this doesn't answer the question. This is a very generic explanation. So annotation and social annotation is a particularly creative act, one that positively influences student writing. In fact, the effect of digital annotation on student writing is akin to a viewer's reception of Camille Pissarro's Les Trois Rouges, Coin de Village Faits d'Hiver, Red Roofs, Corner of a Village, Winter. The painting's title specifies the parameters of the event displayed, just the red roofs, in the village corner, almost winter. There is an in-between and out-of-the-way orientation for this work, but the painting makes a vivid impression on the viewer. That's how allegedly meek and purportedly unimportant marginalia and glosses function for my students. Students' annotations very quickly impress and influence each other's writers with their quick colors and shapes, much in the way that an impressionist painter can capture a fleeting moment in time. Because the information culled from an LLM does a great deal of invention work for students, they will be farther along into their writing projects, which means that more time can be spent on perfecting that output. Our goal might be to impress upon them that AI output needs to be refined and, well, actually read. In order to craft prompts that provide productive outputs, a student must possess a certain level of understanding of disciplinary questions and ideas. It is important to ask the right questions of the machines, and undergraduates may not be prepared to formulate them. They also might accept the slick product of the machine writer, even if it does not represent their own understanding. For this reason, it may be that a focus of AI prompt engineering is misplaced in the undergraduate classroom, especially in classes primarily consisting of first-year students, just beginning their studies. Instead, undergraduate students, as unpracticed writers, might be asked to refine the machine's output, one produced from a prompt prepared by an instructor. The human-machine collaboration cannot finish with perfecting the prompt. In fact, the hard work of AI, of applied AI, should happen in a writer's careful assessment of that output. It should matter how that output is subsequently revised. Paying attention to the way students handle AI output might strike you as being an intermediary stage of the process, but I suspect that it is primary. Applied AI in this instance means developing revision practices. So I'll share two assignments that can stage revision practice for students. The first is having an LLM prepare a reverse outline of an essay draft. You can see here I asked GPT-4, use the following essay draft and create a reverse outline for it. Supply a 5 to 7 word phrase that summarizes the main point of each paragraph of the draft. And it made a reverse outline of one of the drafts of this presentation. This is pretty good, actually. Some of it is ridiculous, like number 12, machine writer is useful in creative grief. I don't know, maybe. But it gives them a chance to actually manipulate and move paragraphs if they are appropriately assigned. The next one asks, it's a little bit different from the addition of sentence thing that I showed you earlier, but this one supplies an LLM with a single sentence, and then ChatGPT will suggest revisions for it. And these are very interesting. I love this sentence. It was gifted to me my first semester teaching writing some 30 years ago, and I use it many times. The sentence is, many different people use many different kinds of drugs for many different reasons. It's a beautiful thing to start with, right? There's so many questions. I have so many questions. The fourth option, which GPT, I love different people, different drugs, different reasons. I mean, it's just wonderful stuff. And then it asks, want help tailoring it for a specific purpose, essay, article, poem. Oh God, not a poem. And say, sure. And now it says, the fourth one is expanded for depth. Many people use many types of drugs for many reasons, recreational, medicinal, emotional, and for many it's a regular part of life. And this very poignant moment here reminds me of the conversation that I had with this student some 30 years ago. I have to learn to let things go. That, oh, no, I want to talk about medicinal drugs, right? And so by exposing this, like the GPT can do that for you. So there are all kinds of repositories that we can source here. Annette V. And her colleagues have made this tremendous work in text gen ed, teaching with text generation technologies. And in it, it ranges from activities that take one class period in a first-year writing course to 6 weeks in an advanced digital humanities course. So for part of my work for this fellowship, I've proposed to design a class, an entire class on AI and writing, on collaborating with AI, and I'm teaching it in part this fall. So this comprehensive approach to the ideal course will inform and sensitize students to the productive and ethical uses of AI. The course would have 4 rhetorically engaging units relevant to the role of large language models in the university, including, of course, AI literacy, the ethical uses of AI, experimenting with AI, and future uses of AI. Students will read from an ever-growing bibliography and collaborate intelligently using multiple AI platforms, and they will experiment much in the same way that I was enjoying a little too much experimenting for this production here. Students will write with AI, they will acknowledge AI's role in their work, and they will forecast and imagine future creative uses for it in their particular interests and studies. And the second phase of the work that I'm doing is to make modules for first-year writing classes, plotting 2 very different points in the curriculum. So the advanced class first, and then earlier on. Before the introduction of AI, students will engage in activities that involve mapping and charting and annotation as evidence of deep reading. Maps, charts, and annotations will be assessed. And then, after AI organizes the charted materials as an essay, students will engage in revision practices, collaborating significantly and modifying the output of AI. The middle piece, the AI-generated material, will not be assessed. However, it will be necessary material for student writers to evaluate before completing their work. In this way, the writing class begins farther along in the making of writing. For instance, if students pay more attention to reading material for insights and record them in charts with the columns with cite, summary, analysis, and connection to other course readings or other experiences in other classes or in their lived experiences, if they record these as annotations in the texts, those charts and glosses can be assessed as if an essay, as if the product of their learning. Indeed, one might understand the medieval marginalia glossed on important works of auteurs as precursors to the contemporary student essay. So perhaps at this literacy moment, the essay is indeed the gloss. After this critical engagement with reading, students will be trained to work with AI by sharing their reading experiences with the machine, which certainly involve guidance in prompt engineering and in the ethical use of AI as a collaborator and machine writer. Using the machine writer to generate the shape of an argument, the human writer can consider the output as a precedent and adapt it towards a particular situation. The human writer can infuse the machine work with details, with wit, and with life, perhaps even with soul. Currently, first-year writing at Hofstra follows the Writing About Writing module, and this is consistent and offers students consideration of the intentionality of their writing. Keep in mind as you think about these things and apply Ethna and Malick's rules for co-intelligence as you experiment with AI. We have Ethna to thank for the paperclip problem. You know, when the paperclip, when AI keeps generating so many paperclips that we have no steel left in the world. And so here are his steps. One is to always invite AI to the table. Think about ways AI can help us reflect and impact our decision making. But two, be the human in the loop. Incorporate your judgment and expertise. AI's weakness, after all, is that it is predictive, but not always truthful. It makes responses that are always what Malick calls happily plausible. Three, treat AI like a person, but tell it what kind of person it is. Converse and constantly refine and redirect AI. And lastly, assume that this is the worst AI you will ever use. Writing to learn is a well-established idea. By writing, one learns exactly what one thinks. It is the technology of writing that solidifies our intellect into exchangeable and portable format. Writing, as Walter Ong describes, restructures consciousness. Writing with AI is the next facet of this restructuring. If we let AI do the learning for our students, we are shortchanging them. On the other hand, if we decide to ignore the potential of AI, we similarly shortchange them. Somehow we must teach them to interact profitably, to collaborate intelligently, so that their learning continues apace with the rapidly changing technological landscape. There's clearly nothing artificial in that. Thanks very much for your attention. It has been a pleasure.
So if anybody has any questions, Alison Zorn is walking around with the microphone, so if you could use the microphone to ask your question.
So Ethna, thank you so much and congratulations. I've been trying to use AI in my classes, and I have my students do a research paper. And how do you connect doing original research using primary resources, secondary resources, and then incorporating it into writing and using AI as a tool to connect those pieces together? Because that's the challenge that I'm dealing with.
Oh, it's a great problem to have. The one thing that I would do is I would populate some of the reading and the research that they're doing and ask the question. So you can supply an LLM with reading, and then have it deal with it. Another thing that that I found with great success is that you're going to get different kinds of writing. So have the students use AI, use an LLM product as a source. And then have them evaluate it write in context. So that's not going to be publishable writing. But if they say, oh, ChatGPT declares this, and I find this to be rather ridiculous or valid, then that's getting them to talk through AI literacy. So basically, you're going to be looking at something that looks messy, but is actually very, very thoughtful. I think that answers what you're asking. So the two things: supply the research to the chat, ask for summaries, ask for questions, and then also have them write differently. Not this kind of writing that you would write for publication, but that they could write that shows their learning.
Thanks, Ethna. That was really fascinating. Will that help? Hi. Thank you. I have a question that might seem a little far afield, but it's about orality, about speaking. And I'm wondering if you have thoughts on how AI can help us, perhaps in a way that traditional writing has not, teach students to have authority, clarity, fluency in speaking, because it seems to me that's really declined dramatically in my long career, and discerning what sounds plausible from what makes no sense is part of what you're talking about. But do you have spoken word assignments that can incorporate this technology?
Yeah, I love this. I think that one of the things one of the strategies that I use is I name all of my assignments is read back as first feedback. So by handing over a piece of writing to another person to read it for you, they can hear, oh, that they don't miss what they've left out, right? So that's one kind of a thing. I think though that when you're thinking about, I think really what you're asking is about oral production. So there are certain habits of mind that oral people have that we no longer possess, right? Because we don't need to. We have this extended capability because writing has made us extend ourselves. So can we go back to that? Only with a lot of strength training, I think. And I'm going to be thinking about this all week now. So thank you for that.
Thanks so much, Ethna. I learned so much. And I'm thinking about so much. I was saying as we came over here, I needed this talk to answer 4 questions I have to answer in the next 3 days. It just seems so relevant. But I'll stick to one thing you said that sparked my curiosity. You were saying that that students generally see writing as labor and reading as leisure. And just to press that, it's very notable, but I find that they might see reading as leisure, but only those who do find reading entertaining, and therefore there's much less reading. And so how do you, if ChatGPT sort of advances the process to where the students are set to refine their writing sooner in the process, like it does skip some background labor, but they don't read, so they actually don't have habits of what refined language sounds like because they don't read. If you could reflect on that part of things.
Yeah, I love this question. There 2 things happened to me. So when I was an undergraduate and I was assigned to read several novels a week. I was an English major, so I would have to go to the library. I have so much work to do. And my friends majoring in business is like, you're reading. It's just not, that was, that was true. Another thing, when we after we graduated from college, at that time the computers, personal computers were on the rise, but they really hadn't impacted my life much. So when I wanted to know something, I went to the library, right? And I went with a friend and I said, okay, now we're going to figure out what we want to do, because I'm an English major, you're an accounting major. What do we want to do? What can we learn here? And he looked at me and said, but these are just books. What are we going to get here? So those kinds of things like factor in this conversation. So how do we get them to read? Well, one thing is this read back as first feedback. If you actually read them their writing, then they react like, no, that's not it. If you hear me stumble, that's one thing. And another thing is, you have to show them there's good stuff in there, because they don't identify as readers, because they are watching videos and grabbing, they have what I call distracted reading experiences, lots of small memes with text and sound bites, and so they don't fall in love with. There's not that still kind of experience of reading, and that's, I think, where we're going to have to put our attention because of AI. And I'm actually grateful to AI for that. Is that helpful?
I've noticed. Oh, is this on? I've noticed a couple of courses being proposed for this semester and the next semester that are about reading, and I've just wondered if that has risen to the surface coincident with what you're describing.
Yeah, I think it must. I mean, I'm glad to hear it. Yeah.
Hi, Ethna. Thank you so much for this wonderful talk. I have a really sort of high-level general question about where AI belongs in the undergraduate curriculum. I mean, it obviously belongs in a writing classroom in the way that you're illustrating. Or does it belong in every single class? Or does it belong in a dedicated class that's part of a general education curriculum? Where does it belong?
So I don't think it belongs as a separate class in the general education curriculum. I think but I do think in the same way that writing, reading, public speaking, I think AI literacy should be part of every single class we teach. Definitely, first year writing, it gets everything. We are the stew of the university, but it's a good stew. It's fortifying, but yeah, I think it does. I think it does belong in everything that we touch and everything that we do. And I actually, I do think, I see some AI refusers in the room. Glad to see you. In some ways, I think that's really important. Well, in all ways, very important. And so just acknowledging that there will be no, there will be no touching of the machine here, and yet they will, so if it's in the water, it's in the water. So yeah, I think it does belong to all of us.
Thank you.
Hi, Ethna. Thank you. I think your use of marginalia is brilliant, and it reminded me of my practice of asking students to make observations. What do you notice? And write your questions about whatever they were reading. And I think it really it returns the authority to the author. But did I mishear you when you said something about an undergraduate is not an author? Or did I mishear you say that?
No. I think maybe you're thinking about the fact that I think that the writing samples that we draw from them, they're too. I think they are glossators. I think they are on the outside of the margins. So they're not the authority, or they don't think of themselves as being authoritative, and so they don't belong in the center. So they are in the margins. And so I would accept that kind of writing, the outside writing, should count as writing, actually.
Oh, right, yeah. Well,
but I wouldn't say that they're not
the formal
authors.
Writing, but isn't part of the task of a writing teacher to make the writer, the inexperienced writer, consider him or herself as an author, and that author has authority to have an opinion but must support that opinion. I mean, that's the question I think I'm asking.
That's great. At what point do they become an author? At what point do they become an expert? I think my days are filled with really first-year students, and I think it's too soon for them. But the students I'm teaching this semester are the ones who annotated by hand very aggressively that sample that I shared with you.
And they become the authority.
And they
then.
are authors. And
right.
in fact, in the self-efficacy charts that I was showing, they were the ones who still only 50% identified as writers, even though they're English majors,
writing.
linguistic
and a writer
majors.
Is a person who writes.
Yeah.
And so, to me, that's the core, and that's why I was troubled when you said, we can't really consider them authors.
Oh, I don't know.
But they are authors of their own work.
I don't know if I said that they're not authors. I'm just saying that we have to lead them to that, and so be patient. And the thing I was suggesting to Carolyn was like, let them write some sort of mutt genres of writing. Let them write in their earliest times as debutante writers. Let them write something that is showing their thought processes rather than the perfected, polished writing that will come later in their academic careers.
Many years ago, I was involved with a writing across the curriculum, and I went out into high schools in Queens, and I encountered many teachers in other disciplines who didn't have time for writing. Well, I teach science, I don't have time for this. And one of them in particular wrote lots of worksheets for his students to respond to. Mm-hmm. And I said to him, you're a writer. Why are you fighting this? Mm-hmm. You are a writer, and I'm not asking you to impose, to teach writing per se, but you're using writing to teach science. And that's just my question. I think, yes, I agree with you totally. They have to discover that AI is not authoritative. It will give you wrong answers many, many times. But that they are still the authority. They are still the author if they're writing. They're the author of whatever they write. That's all. That was my only,
Thank you. I totally agree.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks, Stavros.
Thank you, Ethna, for a very thoughtful, informative presentation. What struck me about your talk, maybe it's my own point of view, is the emphasis on collaboration. And it reminds me of a conversation I had with someone who is the director of a data science program at another university. And the most difficult skill is getting people to collaborate. The math skills of these people coming to this graduate program are off the charts, but they don't like collaborating. They're not good at it. It's a skill that has to be developed. And you're emphasizing here collaboration, which I think is a key general education skill, which our students don't like to learn. They have to find someone, they have to make time, and it's always a hassle. At least with an AI collaborator, you can shape them, and they're available 2 o'clock in the morning whenever you want. So I think what you've highlighted for me is the importance of collaboration and not just of becoming a better writer using these tools. Thank you.
Thank you. It's funny, and I couldn't show you all of the data that I've accumulated, but the charting activities, if they work in a group with 1 or 2 other students, very frequently students will annotate the chart saying, I did this with so-and-so, but he didn't do the work, and they out it like in their handwriting, like it's very, very personal, and so it's true, but they will take on the machine. There's all right, move over. There's no, but they'll whisper in the sidelines about the failures of collaborating, which I think is really interesting. Thanks.
Ethna, thank you for a really great presentation. I really loved it, and I'm going to pick your brain for teaching next semester, C&E, and other things, as I did last time. But so I have a question apropos of the comment about our students. I'm not a writer. I mean, I write stuff. I'm not a writer.
Didn't you just publish a award-winning book. I'm just saying.
But I'm not a writer. I'm an orator. I'm an organizer. I'm a scholar. I'm all these other things. But I write. I'm not a writer. So, and I think writing's work. And there are times where I dread it, but I do it because it's the best. You can't orate everything, right? But so my question is, you talked about what is writing, but I'm curious, who's a writer and what is a writer?
So, this is a couple of years ago, we had a presidential symposium here on AI, and Adam and Karen and I got up and, we talked to the writer of the MLA task force on AI and writing. And then in the questions, Eva stood up and said, well, what is writing anyway? and it was this really interesting moment for him. I was like, oh, I don't know. I don't even know anymore what it is, because I can record things in so many ways, right? And then I think about all kinds of oral productions and things that we make in ways that we write on the world. Oh, here. I'm doing it, Craig. Just like this captured my imagination from a young age. If you write on the world, you can make things up, you can contribute, you can make obstacles and problems for yourself, but you can also erase them. So this kind of ludic thing. So all of this is writing to me. I took issue with that scholar Naomi Barron, who I like very much, so a great linguist, who is saying it can't be writing because there's no humans involved. I'm like, there's lots of humans involved in the production of an LLM. There's lots of them, but they're not representing a singular voice. So the kind of collaboration is mathematical and predictive, but, so I don't know. We could ask Eva, but she just left.
Thank you very much. It was a really wonderful talk. I love the math reference in the background. So, I teach math, and I allow students to use AI in their homework and compare their solutions to the AI solutions. But in the classroom, I test them without AI. So there's a mismatch between assignments where they can collaborate with AI, but to assess them, I assess them differently. And I wonder if you do that or if you somehow do something different.
So I've thought a lot about this, because I obviously make them write by hand. I make them, write by speaking and by image making, successive 24 images, show me what a word means, all kinds of ways, other ways of making arguments. And I think of the part that I like best about the discrepancy between what they prepare outside, where they have lots of time and lots of resources, let's just call them resources, to produce something, versus the on-the-spot kind of writing that they do in the classroom, is kind of like what happens when you're playing. Do you remember that game Spirograph, where you put a pen in a gear and you make these florets, right? And I always liked when the thing blasted off the page, like off the gear, so that it was not predictable. And then that became something. That became, a part of a covered wagon, or something else. So I think that there's magic in that on-the-spot writing that we should hold higher in some ways than the kinds of productions that they can produce if they have time and lots of other people to help them along the way. Thank you.
Thank you.
So just thank you once again to Ethna for doing an informative and thought-provoking lecture.